Hello, this is Matt on the Moon Lambo channel, and I've got two topics to cover with you in this latest Moon Lambo Hot Jam. And I'll start with this news update from you today. Ripple files partly redacted documents to court after consensus on sealing was reached with SEC. So they want to keep a bit of that information secret. Also, I am engaging currently in a fun back and forth with somebody who thinks that XRP's value proposition is pretty much worthless. And I could not more fervently disagree. And this is occurring on Twitter right now. And so I want to share with you the conversation to this point. It's a fun back and forth. It's a good opportunity to think critically. And it's nice in this particular instance. It legitimately is an exchange of ideas, certainly to this point. A lot of times, when you're engaging with people that think that XRP is useless, they're either ideologically driven, they come out aggressively, they're trollish, all that type of stuff. And at least to this point, that's not what I've encountered. And so I always think it's fun to have talks with people that disagree with me on the host of different issues. And the conversation's certainly more interesting when we're not all sitting around agreeing with each other, right? Generally speaking. And so I still think that this individual is wrong. He thinks that I'm wrong, and that's fine. I'm willing to be persuaded. But on this topic, it's just this idea that XRP is not needed, and that the central banks are going to make the use case for XRP obsolete. So plenty to say on this. Before going any further, though, I want to be clear. I do not have a financial background of any kind. I am not offering financial advice, and you should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. I'm just an enthusiast who likes to make YouTube videos about XRP and Ripple and cryptocurrency, and that's all that's going on here. Anyway, after meeting with the SEC lawyers on April 1st to discuss Ripple's request to keep their documents out of the public eye, Ripple Labs has been granted consent to partly redact their documents that contain private commercial information. An agreement with the SEC has been reached on that. Now, Ripple has started submitting partly redacted documents to court. Yeah, and by the way, since there's a lot of stuff floating around in social media, I actually saw, for a couple of these anyway, the versions that were not redacted. And so I can understand why. I mean, you're talking about contact information, this or that. So a lot of it makes sense to pull this stuff out here. And then the piece continues. Lawyer James K. Filan has published screened copies of two documents submitted by Ripple Labs to Magistrate Judge Sarah Netburn that have been redacted after the discussion between Ripple and the SEC took place on April 1st. So far, consensus has been reached regarding two documents out of four, and all of them are related to discovery materials filed with the court in connection with the discovery-related disputes. And the SEC suggested their way to redact these two documents so that the confidential data that Ripple does not want to publicize remains sealed. So at least to this point, they've been able to agree on two of the four documents. Hopefully they can find a way to agree on the remaining two as well. But it's not outrageous to not want contact information out into the wild to this degree. I mean, can you imagine if you're a part of this and you don't know, and then these are just seemingly innocuous emails and you're a Ripple employee, and then your contact information gets out and it's spread all over social media? Like, that doesn't sound fun. That does not sound fun. But anyway, Ripple keeps insisting on the full sealing of the other two documents. And here's a quote. After a meet and confer on April 1st, the parties reached agreement on two of the four documents at issue, but not been able to reach agreement with respect to the other two. And James K. Filan commented, quote, SEC's proposed redactions were filed and remain under seal. And so there you can see the redacted versions on the screen right there with lots of fun-looking black boxes. So good times. All right, now into this. This is going to be a fun critical thinking exercise here. Now, what we're talking about here, it's something that I've been aware of. It's a topic that I've been researching for over 3 years at this point. And my position has been that the SWIFT financial system, which is bank-owned, by the way, it's incredibly inefficient, despite recent developments with like Swift GPI, which is basically the same thing as RippleNet's messaging portion. They just don't have a solution for settlement on the Swift network. And so what I've been saying for some time is that the only solution for settlement that humans have devised requires the usage of a technologically sufficient decentralized cryptocurrency with an open market price. And so the technological aspect is important because it has to be quick, cheap to transfer, and it better not be energy intensive, or that's going to be an issue as well, because that would add to the cost anyway. And then as far as it being decentralized and having an open market price, that's important because outside of the tech factors of the cryptocurrency in question, there are trust issues. There are trust issues between banks and remittance firms that may not know each other that well and may not have working relationships. And so utilizing a neutral jurisdictionless cryptocurrency is a solution. You don't have to worry about trust. All you have to have is a sufficient blend of price and liquidity for a decentralized cryptocurrency. It's not going to benefit you or your competitors. And so that, if you can talk about geopolitical interests as well, it's no longer an issue by just utilizing a jurisdictionless neutral bridge currency. You're removing counterparty risk from that aspect of the transaction right there. So that's crucial. Outside of that, the only way to transact is to have pre-funding of accounts. Humans have not devised another solution. And so what I've been sharing on this channel for some time is that whether you're talking about a bank coin, whether you're talking about a stable coin or a central bank digital currency, they all have the same shortcomings, which is that counterparty risk. And so really what you're talking about is if you want to call it a coin, that is representative of a dollar. It's like when you're talking about a central bank digital currency, like say there's a United States dollar central bank digital currency. Well, it is the United States dollar. It's a new representation of it. It is the United States dollar. So technologically, the way it moves around has shifted at that point, but it has the same underlying monetary policy. And so the geopolitical factors at play, the reasons that other countries around the world might not want to just prop it up, all of those concerns are still there. All of that's still in play. Nothing has functionally changed. And so it's key to understand all of this. And so there was this interview, which is not what I'm going to be highlighting in this video. I've talked about that sufficiently in recent videos, I'd say. But there was an interview between Ripple CEO Brad Garlinghouse and CNN host Julia Chatterley. And she shared this clip here. And Julia Chatterley did. And she wrote, SEC lawsuit. Ripple and I have been more transparent than anyone else in the crypto industry about our activity. And so that was a quote from Brad Garlinghouse. And then she writes, CEO Brad Garlinghouse says the SEC is wrong on the facts and on the law. And then somebody responded to that with the following. We are working with some of, and certainly speaking with, many central banks around the world. And so that was a quote from Brad Garlinghouse from this interview. Somebody named Chuck Gaffert jumped in, and this is the individual who I'm having a nice back and forth with, exchanging our positions on this. And so I'm always willing to be persuaded, but you're going to have a hell of a case, and I will explain why. I think he's got quite the uphill battle here, but if he makes a good case, then yeah, we'll go from there. But he wrote in response to that, no central bank trial has used XRP or has committed to use it in the future. This value proposition is dead. That's what Chuck said. And this is where I jumped in now. And I wrote, that's because central banks aren't remittance companies. You seem to misunderstand the role of central banks. They set monetary policy, among other things, but they don't facilitate conversion of one fiat currency to another, so of course they're not using XRP. Now, I want to be clear what I meant by that. Up to this point in time, it has not been the role of central banks. They haven't assumed this role, this idea of cross-border transactions converting from one fiat currency to another. That's not what they do. That's been left to the private sector. Banks and remittance companies have taken care of that. Most of the liquidity comes from not just banks, but very large banks. Small and mid-sized banks don't have enough capital that they can just lie dormant to make these transactions possible. And so it's these large, very wealthy banks that do have this dormant capital. And so it's not really doing anything except for it sort of is for the large banks. You see, the small and the mid-sized banks that don't have sufficient capital, just to leave dispersed all over the planet so that they can make markets, and then as a result, convert from one fiat currency to another. Since they don't have enough money to make that happen because they're just small and mid-sized banks, and it may not even be their core business. What they do is they pay their larger competitors, the large banks, to tap in to the pre-funding of accounts the world over. And so central banks have never been a part of that. I'm not aware. If there is something, that would be an outlier instance. I haven't seen, up to this point in time, I haven't seen anything like that. And so what I've always cited is, and I've been saying this for years on the channel, even if a central bank wanted to create their own central bank digital currency and position it for such a usage as bridging stuff, all you're going to do is create a walled garden. And that walled garden won't communicate with other walled gardens or other individuals that are just operating out in the world, because they're not going to have the same access. They're not going to have to whatever the central bank digital currency is necessarily, especially if it's a coin specifically designed for a closed network. Because this, mind you, if you're talking about like a coin, like a stable coin or something, like some of these bank coins, let me just say this, some of these bank coins that have been proposed that would work within closed networks, they're not something that are being traded, so they don't have an open market price. They just are worth whatever the fiat currency backing it is worth. They're not traded on cryptocurrency exchanges or anything like that. All right. And so, even if the United States dollar ends up being traded on cryptocurrency exchanges, which is what would have to happen, the central bank digital currency version of the US dollar, if that's what we're talking about here, it would have to be there in order for it to be liquid. And if it's going to be within a closed network, then other entities, they don't have really access to it if they're outside of it. And so they can create their own competing networks, but then you're just recreating the same friction we already had. Because those problems do exist today. And so you're just exacerbating the problem right now. And so Chuck ended up writing what I'm about to read to you here, highlighting a project where, and admittedly, I don't know a ton about this, but from what I've read after learning about this because of Chuck, it does seem like it's just nothing but another walled garden here. It's exactly what it reads like. And so, admittedly, I wasn't aware of this one. But it's not solving the problem, because let me just read what he wrote first. He wrote, "These central bank digital currency projects will supersede current methods of conversion of one fiat currency to another." And so how are they doing that? Because a central bank digital currency, if it's one currency that's representing a fiat currency, well, that doesn't solve a problem. You're just having a new technologically advanced version of it, but there's nothing... there's nothing about that which will make it just magically interoperate, right? Because you have to make markets in order for people to be willing to trade something of value for something else that's worth value. You have to, right? So there is no way around it. And that's the reason that SWIFT's been what it has been for 50 years. There isn't another solution for that. You need to have liquidity somewhere, and you need to have markets open for people to trade one thing for another, because that's what's not going away. People are always going to trade one thing for another. And so that's why the pre-funding occurs. So you see, banks create relationships with one another. They hold, one bank will hold their money in another bank. That's a Nostro account. And then the inverse of that, their money in your bank, is a Vostro account, right? And so that's what's actually happening here. And so you have to build trust, and building trust can take 8 to 12 months normally, is what I had read, for banks to gain trust with one another. And so when you're talking about the correspondent banking system, it's nothing more than a chain of bilateral banking relationships. That's what it is. And so in reading through this little screen grab, I'm not going to read this. It's on your screen. If you want to pause and actually read this, this is what Chuck's shared with me. I've read it a couple times. And I'm about 100% sure it's exactly what I think it is. I'm as close to 100% certain of this as I could be, unless something's pointed out to me that I couldn't even fathom. Which, and given that I've been in conversations like this like umpteen million times, like, they always turn out the same. When somebody thinks they found something that doesn't require a decentralized cryptocurrency like XRP to facilitate conversion from one fiat currency to another, inevitably it's just another walled garden. Every single one I've come across, it's a walled garden, because you'd have to actually solve the problem of exchange, trust. You have to solve the problem of trust, of sending one thing to somebody and getting something back in return. You'd have to solve the problem of trust there, and the markets still have to be open, which is an insurmountable task. Like, that's not something that humans are going to do, because you get stolen from otherwise, right? Right? You're just going to magically have this trust out of nowhere with everybody that's on the planet. Like, that's not how this works. And so even if this functionally ends up working in the future, this would be a small network, and you're never going to get every single bank the world over to jump into this network, just like you're never going to get every single human and every single business on the planet to adopt Bitcoin. Because there are all sorts of maxis out there, Bitcoin maxi trolls, that do believe Bitcoin will be the one thing to remain. All fiat currencies are going away. All other altcoins are going away. It's a crazy position to have, but Bitcoin maxis actually believe that everything's going to go away and everyone's just going to harmoniously govern the usage of Bitcoin. Well, it's never going to happen because different people have different interests, and governments are not going to give up their sovereignty in controlling their monetary system. It's just not ever going to happen. That doesn't mean there's not a place for Bitcoin, but it's not going to be only Bitcoin. Just like right here, whatever this network is that he's citing right here, called multiple CBDC, MCBDC for short, you're not going to get every nation around the planet to just jump on board. And without that happening, you're going to have different people with different interests using different means of currency, means of exchange, and it's not going to interoperate. To be clear, that's just not going to happen. And so I responded to him and I wrote the following. This is another walled garden. Banks outside of this closed ecosystem will need to create new markets in order to interact, recreating the same friction that already exists today. In terms of being a global solution, this is a dead value proposition. And I firmly believe what I wrote there. It's in terms of being a global solution, it's already dead. Now, in terms of it having traction for the small network there, these people that are already friends, these central banks that are already friends with one another, that want to work together on this, if they do that and it gets something up, more power to them. That's fine. It's not a global solution. There is still a need to bridge, which means you need a cryptocurrency that's decentralized like XRP. XRP is the only cryptocurrency in the world that's being positioned for that use case. And so I highlighted this little snippet from the screen grab he shared, and I highlighted and read this portion from what he wrote, from what he shared. Will allow the participating central banks, right there. So again, this indicates this is a walled garden. It will only work for those central banks that are choosing to participate. You will not get every single central bank on the planet to jump into this network. Not even close. There's a handful of them. We'll see if this even ends up operating. And if it does, super duper, doesn't solve a problem. And even then, they're still going to have to have some sort of funding mechanism, right? Because they still have to trust each other. So there's still skin in the game among one another. So you have to have these relationships that are built. It doesn't remove trust. The counterparty risk is still there, right? And so then I responded I continued. Consider that MoneyGram operates in 20,000 corridors. Do you think that this closed system is going to reach that scale? Of course not. It can't. It's not designed to. It's designed to benefit a small few who are in charge, which is the same with every walled garden. Competing jurisdictions have no incentive to enrich them by adopting their closed system. The only true global solution will require a decentralized bridge asset where no single participant has an advantage over anyone else, including operating costs and system control. And then Chuck jumped back in here and he wrote, a token is not necessary for interoperability. Let me pause right there before reading the rest of it. That's true if you're going to pre-fund, but then you're not solving the problem. If you're going to pre-fund, yeah, no token necessary. Fine. That's what we're doing already. And then he writes, the central banks are implementing ISO 20022 and other API standards. Bank of England has a major initiative underway to complete this standard in their SWIFT and CHAPS system. And so then I responded with the following. Any entity not within this closed system will not interoperate with it. XRP could help there. And so let me pause to be clear. I'm saying even if this closed system finds success and XRP is not needed there because they have their own setup that's beneficial for the small few in the system, well, still that requires trust, so you're not solving the global problem. But if that closed system wants to interoperate with any other bank or remittance firm, there is no trust there. You need a neutral bridge. In that instance, XRP could still help there. That's what I wrote. And so I continued. XRP could help there. Any system within this closed system will need to pre-fund, which is the settlement problem with SWIFT that's existed for 50 years. Trust is still a problem. Now, at this point, I wanted to just hear how he thinks that this would solve a problem and make XRP absolutely useless. And so I asked him the following. Can you provide an example transaction within this closed system to explain why you believe that a token is not necessary and that pre-funding is not an issue? I mean, walk me step by step through the mechanics of an example transaction and explain how the money is moving. And so I want to make sure that Chuck has thought through this because I have. And so consider, Think about how flows work within the existing system without XRP. And how are you going to get rid of this? Let's just say that you're doing a transaction from a bank in the United States to a bank in Mexico, and not using XRP, just in the traditional financial system, utilizing SWIFT. So let's say the messaging portion is complete, but then you got to settle, which means actually sending the funds. So if you're doing it through the traditional system, you already have an existing relationship with one another, the bank in the United States with the bank in Mexico. And so what magically happens? What is going to happen here? So money is sent ultimately from the United States to Mexico, let's say, right? Okay, so that bank in the United States on behalf of the customer is sending this money so that the customer can get the USD over there, right? Sent overseas, right? And then converted to the Mexican peso. So the bank in the United States sends the United States dollar, not using XRP in this hypothetical scenario. What do they get back? Because they just gave something of actual value. They gave United States dollars to another bank in Mexico. What are they going to get back? Something, right? The Mexican peso, right? And so how does that work? Because understand, in order for that to happen, in order for on demand, this customer to be able to send money from the United States to Mexico and then convert into the Mexican peso, there must be liquidity on the United States side, meaning there have to be United States dollars that are available to be transferred in case there's a customer that wants to take advantage of that activity. The activity being, again, sending their money to Mexico and converting to Mexican pesos. There have to be dollars there. If the dollars aren't out there, then when the customer comes, then the bank will just say, oh, sorry, we don't have any dollars set aside to send that over to the bank in Mexico. And if they can't do that, then the bank in Mexico, what are they going to do? Well, they're sure as hell not going to send Mexican pesos back, right? So this is why pre-funding exists. And so I would need a step-by-step example explaining how the money flows and why XRP isn't needed as a solution there, and why pre-funding would no longer be necessary. Because in the example I just cited, which is an example that does happen, it was a made-up one in this case, but it really does happen in the real world, you need pre-funding. That is exactly what's happening. It requires trust. Trust is that, and so with XRP, trust, the requirement to have trust, it's eliminated. All you have to do is, you'll have this eliminates the chain of bilateral banking relationships. Maybe a trust and exchange, but you don't have to trust every other bank on the planet. It's a lot easier to trust an exchange than just every single other bank or remittance firm on the planet. So the issue of trust is pretty well eliminated at that point. I don't see another solution for that in terms of actually sending money around the planet. So there's the trust issue, and then there's the concern about actually having funds that are available. And so, again, totally willing to hear about it. But that's why I asked him. I was like, I just want to make sure Chuck thought through this. If he's making these claims, functionally, how does the money move around so that you solve the trust issue, and that pre-funding is no longer an issue, and it doesn't require the utilization of a decentralized cryptocurrency like XRP? Like, good luck. Like, humans have been working on this for 50 years and haven't found a solution. So if Chuck is aware of something, I legitimately want to know, and that would make me reassess, how I feel about XRP being adopted for the long haul. But there isn't. I feel very. If I'm wrong, I'll admit it. I've been having these conversations for years now, and nobody has ever come at me in one of these conversations and actually articulated a case that proves that all those things that I cited, the pre-funding is not needed, XRP is not needed, and trust issue solved. Like, globally, mind you, it has to be globally. Like, it's a pipe dream, guys. It just is. And so but Chuck, nothing against him. Again, to be clear, like, this is a very nice back and forth, and I think he's operating in good faith. I just think he's wrong. He thinks I'm wrong. I think he's wrong, and that's fine. That's how a conversation between adults should be. It's been nice so far. And so then he responded to me to wrap this up. And he wrote, there were projects at the BIS Innovation Summit that address this. I'm on vacation for the next few days, but I'll find the info and respond later. Cheers from Florida. Which I thought was very nice. So I'm going to actually hit the heart on that one. There we go. So hopefully it gets back to me, because I think it's a really fun topic of conversation, and I'd be happy to update this in the future as soon as I hear back from him. But that's the way all this works. And I think not enough people understand exactly how the payment flows works, and why trust is an issue, and why XRP is a solution, and why pre-funding has been exactly how money has moved around the planet. It's been necessary for it to happen for 50 years. I just think most people don't functionally understand. But anyway, I'll go ahead and wrap up there. I am not a financial advisor. Do not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. That would be a very, very, very bad idea. Until next time, to the moon, Lambo.